to item 11. And it's motion 6, Councillors Mylet and Kenny MacLaren. Councillor Bill Mylet.
Thanks, Provost. I know this is something that comes before the Council quite a little bit, and I think it's important that we recognise that we actually have these food banks, and not just at our local authority, but in many local authorities, and also recognise the fact that a lot of people actually volunteer. Not only they volunteer, but people just go in off their own backs, buy food and donate to these. But I would like to talk more about the reason why we're actually in this situation. And the reason for this situation, and again it's actually in the motion with the percentages, but it seems to be that we have a Westminster government hell-bent on attacking the most vulnerable people in our society. They do it under the guise that they should go out and get a job. We've probably, and I've certainly been one of the people that have been made redundant, especially during certain times. I know the feeling, and I was fortunate enough to do something about that. But not everybody can be quite as lucky to get themselves out of it that quick. And when we look at the weeks and weeks and weeks of delays before they get any support whatsoever, we are not a third world country. When you walk out the doors of this chamber, it doesn't look like a third world country, but yet there's people in our streets that are starving, including children. That is a complete and utter failure of government, an absolute failure. And whilst those benefits are maintained by Westminster, we need to realise that we need to ask and get action on this. It's not good. It shouldn't be tolerated. I think it was Mary Black, and I think probably the best quote I've ever heard about this is, when Westminster needs done up or a palace needs a lick of paint, they can find the money. When we want to go and target people, whether it's dropping a couple of bombs in Syria, Iraq or wherever else the American president wants to attack next, we'll join in and drop a few bombs. We can find the money to do these things, but we cannot find the money to feed the most vulnerable people in our society. It's just not acceptable. And I'm looking over at the Conservatives in this chamber to see if once they will agree with me that this should not happen, not in this modern day and age. Whilst we've got nuclear submarines up and down the Clyde, only minutes from our doorstep, but we can't provide people the money to feed themselves. Provost, I move this motion and hope we get the support of the Council.
Councillor MacLaren, do you want to come in second just now?
I'll formally second and reserve the right to come back.
Okay. Do we have any other? Councillor Sheridan? Do you have an amendment? Amendment, Councillor Sharkey.
I took advantage of the break, and I'm sure that Councillor MacLaren will explain that.
Councillor James MacLaren. Not James McLaren. John McIntyre. So do you also have an amendment, Councillor Sharkey?
That was it. If it's agreeable and he changes the first line there, I'm quite happy to withdraw my motion in favour of his, or my amendment rather in favour of his.
So you've already discussed this, okay?
As I said, we took advantage of the break that you gave us.
Can you tell us what the amendment is going to be now then?
Yes, thank you, Provost. I've agreed to remove the first sentence, which shows the increase, and just leave the second sentence. And that will replace the final sentence of the motion.
So we're deleting working age benefits?
Yes.
That's that sentence, just to be clear. Yeah. Deleting that and keeping the sentence that begins with furthermore and ends with benefits.
Yeah.
Okay, who's your seconder, Councillor McIntyre? Councillor Graham. Are you accepting the amendment, Councillor? Okay, Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Provost. The amendment It speaks for itself, and it reflects the reality of devolution in that Social Security Scotland has these powers. This body was supposed to be set up in 2017 at a cost of £307 million. We're now 3 years later and it's spent £651 million and the position is not in place. So we've had if we're concerned about benefits delay, we have to acknowledge there's a devolved reality here. We also have to acknowledge the delays caused in setting up the benefit service, and we also have to acknowledge the amount of money that is, the increase in money that's been caused. And I think it's interesting when you look at this figure, when we benchmark that compared to the costs that it was going to be to set up an independent Scotland, which was going to be £250 million into 18 months. We've now spent £650 million not to set up a social security agency. And I know there's other motions which are going to talk about funding and budget settlement, so I don't want to dwell too much on this, but there's a line in the motion about politically motivated austerity. We went through a massive financial crisis and a huge recession in this country, and that has led to incredible pressure on spending and tax increases, and we were left with a budget deficit of nearly 10%, and it's taken all this time to get that down to 1%. That's been a huge undertaking, and it's been a very, very painful adjustment. But when we talk about politically motivated austerity, we have to realise that the starting point just now for an independent Scotland, which is advocated by the SNP, would be a 7% budget starting now. So if you favour independence, you want more austerity, you want it deeper, you want it longer. We've only just begun. So the only politically motivated austerity is from those who favour independence. Thank you.
Councillor Graham? Okay. Councillor Sheridan?
Thanks, Provost. I'm sure the mover and seconder of both the motions and the amendment are doing so with the best intentions. But if I could, like Councillor Nicholson, refer to COSLA, which is a well-respected organisation, and I think it's time, or what they're saying is time that we put our words into action. And COSLA has warned that successive years of cuts in local government funding combined with rising inflation and demand have put the Scottish Government's 2030 child poverty targets at risk. Scottish and local government are supposed to have a joint priority to tackle child poverty in all forms through many of the essential services that councils currently deliver, from social work to housing. As the budget stands, these services will be under threat, and the central role that councils have in reaching the most vulnerable and once again not fully recognised. The risks of not investing include a generation of children continue to live in poverty and unable to reach their full potential. Homelessness, persistent unemployment in some families, hunger, family breakdown and its wider social costs to all parts of the public sector. An editorial in the Scotsman on the subject urges the Scottish Government to be more honest about the challenges and the cost of meeting them, and says that for more than a decade it has preferred to cut services with government rhetoric desperately undermined by the reality of local authority funding. I think we should listen to these wise words and act accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCartan?
Thank you, Provost. I don't have any great problem with the amended amendment in terms of that relevance, but what I did want to say was to find it appalling the way that the Conservatives try to pass the buck on this. And the poverty, should I say first of all that I would absolutely totally agree with the motion in terms of the work of the food bank. I think it's absolutely excellent. But, you know, universal credit, when it was introduced, and it started being introduced during the coalition time with the Liberal Democrats and the Tories. Indeed, it was a Liberal Democrat policy in the first place, and the whole point of it was supposed to have been to stop people from having a break in payments between short-term working and getting their benefits, because people had had to wait for so long to get benefits, because if they went to do a wee job, then they had to go back on the train to try and get the benefits, and the benefits weren't forthcoming for weeks and weeks. So the policy was to try to ensure that if somebody was particularly on long-term benefits, it wasn't worth their while trying to take a wee job. They could take a job for a few months, then go back onto benefits, then take a job for a few months, and then go back onto benefits without any break. And that was the principle of universal credit. When the Liberal Democrats were no longer in government, one of the first acts of the Tories was to take £6 billion out of the development and rolling out of universal credit, which completely destroyed the positive message that universal credit was supposed to have. And this idea that people have to now wait for 5 weeks before they get any money, I mean, it's an absolute indictment on the Conservatives that they have allowed that to be introduced, and it is causing such pain, such sadness, such hardship for people in this area as well as anywhere else. Yes, the SNP government can introduce things, have introduced some things to try and alleviate some of the problems, but for the Conservatives to use that as a stick to hit anybody else with, they should be beating their own backs with the stick that they caused for this. You know, as somebody else said, there is money for lots of other things. That £6 billion would have made a huge difference to helping to get people at the poorest end of the system onto a proper, balanced economy, to ensure that they could have benefits, they could then have work experience without damaging their benefits, and that's what universal credit was about. And the Tories, for political reasons, utterly destroyed that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCartan. Councillor Sharkey.
I'm not going to follow up with anything that Councillor McCartan you said there, because I just want to try and maybe amplify it, because in the 19th century the workhouse was designed to be a foul, an unreasonable and harsh place, so that only the truly and really desperate would actually take advantage of the parish, as it was called at that time. But in the 21st century we use the entry system to this particular new benefit. I've been with 2 different constituents to the benefits office just to be with them, to make sure that they were fairly treated, and I was appalled at the hoops that they were supposed to jump through in order to do this. It has been made cruel and difficult to make sure that they can put people off that particular money which I absolutely feel that they are entitled to. One of the reasons that I asked for the amendment was that I don't think that the 1.7 rise is enough, and it is certainly something that needs to be addressed. But the reason I was putting forward an amendment is because this motion is simply been put up to create more of a grievance with the English government in Westminster. And I mean, the SNP need to start thinking about what they're going to do to help people in Scotland, and not spend their time looking for a grievance with people in England. The fact is that for the last, it's over 12 years now that you've been in power, and more and more we get promises from the SNP about what they're going to do. This doesn't even bother with a promise about how they're going to help food banks. And I'll tell you, any time that I've been to a food bank, the one promise I make there is I tell the volunteers and the workers there that it's our ambition to get rid of them. There shouldn't be food banks in the 21st century. Our job as politicians is to get rid of food banks. They are absolutely admirable. The people that work there have nothing but my complete and utter respect. However, the fact that they exist, they are part of the system that is the 21st century poorhouse, and we need to get rid of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Andy Doig.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, I work with vulnerable people on a day-to-day basis, and I know some of them have waited over 5 weeks for universal credit. It really is a shocking. The system, as it is completely unworkable, and it is pushing people further and further into desperate states. And I think it is symptomatic. I would agree, I have to say, I'd agree with the motion by Councillor Mylet and Kenny MacLaren to keep the phrase politically motivated austerity cuts in, because it's not like we haven't been here before. The National Government in 1931 tried a similar policy. In 1981, the Thatcher government tried a similar policy. David Cameron's government initiated a similar policy. It didn't work in 1931, it didn't work in 1981, and it's not working now. Austerity cuts don't work as a way to try and run a national economy. You can't run a national economy on the same basis as you would a corner shop. It's a nonsense model of economics. And it's also, I have to say to Councillor McIntyre, who's an individual I like very much, but I have to say, Councillor McIntyre, your 7% notional deficit for an independent Scotland is complete illiterate economics. It really is, because it assumes what economists would call ceteris paribus. Things would remain as they are. It assumes you'd have the same government with similar policies, and that would lead to this notional 7% deficit. There's no professional economist in Scotland today will defend the GERS figures. It's simply a snapshot of who we are here and now. It's not some kind of notional crystal ball that will tell you where an independent Scotland will be in future.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dowling.
Thank you, Provost. I'd like to refer back to some of the comments that were raised by Councillor McCartin there. I often hear Councillor McCartin referring back to the coalition government as the good old days, and I really am quite flabbergasted that she's brought this back when we're now talking about aspects of universal credit. Very briefly, in a previous professional lifetime, one of my roles was to work as an advisor in Lanarkshire, helping to support health professionals on the front line of the NHS who were going to be dealing with the impact of universal credit on the most vulnerable patients within that community. And part of my job was to advise them on how they could guide and support those very vulnerable patients to the right benefits, advice, etc., to help them navigate what was coming down the line with universal credit. And I really have to say respectfully to Councillor McCartin, she's really blown a lot of hot air on this. The flaws were built into the design of universal credit, and that was under the Lib Dems' watch. So to be sitting here and lecturing other people in this chamber, it just defies belief. I'll give you 2 examples and then I'll move on. Just 2, I could talk about this all day, and sure many others could too. The 5-week wait was initially a 6-week wait, and it was argued down to a 5-week wait. It was always grotesque, and that was built in by design. We also had the utter outrage of building in a single payment to the household, which was built in by design, an absolute charter for domestic abuse, financial enablement. So I'm really sorry. I may agree with some of the comments that you've made there, Eileen, but really, if you and your party had not supported the rollout of universal credit in its form when it was first landed on our most vulnerable communities, you could have done something about it then, and you didn't. So it's time that we just kept bringing it back to a little bit of reality of how that happened at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCain.
Thanks, Provost. Councillor McIntyre, I heard you saying there the UK government has a real spending crisis and, has to be careful how they spend the money. But I never heard you saying why they spend the money in Trident, Buckingham Palace, Westminster. Some of these things were brought up in the question. I'd like to hear you telling me why it's okay to spend money on that, but not to spend money to do away completely with food banks. Now that's food banks not only in Scotland, but all over the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Steele?
Thank you, Provost. It's a pleasure to follow the last two speakers. I didn't plan to speak on this, so I won't be anything like as eloquent as they were, but that was extremely valuable contributions. I'm sorry to disappoint Councillor Sharkey, but there's absolutely nobody on this side of the room who will be taking any hints on how to think from him, now or ever, I should think. I've just got a couple of quick points. I don't think there's any councillors here who haven't had a constituent on the phone in panic and stressed, and I would not actually terror isn't too strong a word, because they're moving house, they're in rent arrears, and universal credit is playing on their minds because they're getting all sorts of messages about what they're getting into. It's a terrible system, and you don't mitigate a terrible system by getting somebody else to fix it or pay for it. You get rid of a terrible system. It's that simple. Also, briefly in regards to what this council does every year at the Finance Board, the paper comes up before us in which 1.9 million is set aside to deal with the bedroom tax. The first 2 years, at least in my memory, £500,000 was set aside to mitigate the worst aspects of universal credit. That's the best part of £2.5 million. We've got two motions here talking about the budget being short. Well, there's £2.5 million we could be using if we were only trying to mitigate the worst aspects of this policy. It's going to stun you to learn that I'm going to accuse you of a certain degree of political hypocrisy here, gentlemen. You can't have it both ways.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bibby?
Thanks, Provost. My initial reaction to the motivation and the amendment was a plague on both your houses. Universal credit, the consequences of universal credit are an abomination, and the existence of food banks, as has been pointed out, is a scar on our civilization in the 21st century. However, the motion, I feel a bit queasy because let me not be accusing either Councillor Mylet or MacLaren of politically motivated actions here. And the reason I feel queasy is because the amendment talks about the powers that the Scottish Government has in terms of welfare that they're not fully using, and the new powers which come on stream enable them to rid Scotland of food banks, because politics, if it's anything, is the art of the possible. And so you need to ask why in actual fact action is not being taken in that regard. And the reason I feel queasy is because, and I think this is where the SNP motion is a bit disingenuous, is that the aforementioned MP for Paisley and Renfrewshire South's main hobby horse is one of austerity, and attacking austerity and the existence of food banks rightly. But the reason she and others on the SNP do that is because they know and they have calculated that actually it's the best recruiting sergeant they have for the independence cause. And therefore, as I say, there's an element of disingenuous motivation in terms of this motion. And as I say, the amendment does go some way, but the Tories themselves cannot, as has been said, pass the buck on this issue. This has to be resolved because people who are the poorest and most vulnerable continue to be attacked and continue to fail to be protected, attacked by the Tories at Westminster, and continue to be unprotected by the SNP government at Holyrood. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Patterson, and then I'm going to bring in Councillor Kenny MacLaren to sum up.
Many thanks, Provost. I've enjoyed listening to some contributions to this debate, some more thought out and some with more humility than others. Take it back. We'll start with Councillor McCartan. Councillor Brown was right. Universal credit was designed in such a way that this delay wasn't, or the system doesn't work, therefore the payments delay. The delay was inbuilt. The delay was designed by, yes, a Conservative government, but they were propped up by a Liberal Democrat partner. They well know they managed to get charges in poly bags in trade-off for these benefit sanctions, so hooray. But to sit there and disassociate yourself with the actions of the coalition, I find it difficult to a circle to square. I appreciate that they got worse after years left. I don't deny that for any moment, but to make out there was some kind of utopian situation with the coalition is absolutely bizarre. It's not what I remember at the time, and it's not what I remember at the time when I worked at the Department of Work and Pensions and the launch of universal credit, to say it was disastrous is not too strong a word. You had people like myself asked to administer a benefit that had no clear out policies, no standards of procedure, that was essentially made up as you went, because they didn't actually understand the welfare system, or maybe they did, but they were willfully trying to not understand the welfare system was to help people. It was designed to penalise people in this case. It was absolutely incredible. Now we talk about the inbuilt 6-week wait, which became 5-week wait, and all things. There's a thing called waiting days, which is an old traditional thing in benefits. There used to be 3 waiting days because you lost your job on a Friday and you had a new one on a Monday back in the day. That is long gone. That actually got increased to 5 waiting days under the coalition government, and those days could be waived if you met a certain set of circumstances. Great. One of those circumstances is if you were a victim of domestic abuse. That's a great exemption. I agree with that exemption. But you on the phone were made to go into quite a lot of detail so you were satisfied that the person was a victim of abuse, police report number, details. I mean, it was absolutely stomach-churning. Now, you're asking people to do a job that essentially I think many felt uncomfortable with, myself included, and I then moved on to citizens' advice in Pollock and became poacher-turned gamekeeper, as some might have said. But I knew the system, and I again used my knowledge of the system to help support people who found themselves on the wrong end of the universal credit disaster, as I say again. Now, I probably could have stomached this amendment as an addition, because we're all culpable. The UK government and the Scottish government are culpable in austerity. We can't wash our hands. We do what we can. We've created many new benefits, many new payments. But to say you just create a new benefit, how does that interact with a reserve benefit? If we create a new benefit and give somebody more money here, what's to stop the Tories taking them off in tax credits? We can't just be expected to mitigate forever. There's a reality here that these benefits interact, and the level of dissociation that the Conservatives in this chamber take with their own government is absolutely outrageous. To sit here and lecture us, the SNP, on this is absolutely incredible, as if you aren't here, as if you aren't part of the Conservative and Unionist Party, because you are. You're here to represent them. So let's hear the justification for universal credit, the justification for the rape clause. Let's hear it. We don't, because you sit there and move amendments to blame the Scottish Government. I accept our part of the blame in creating austerity, and I'd like to think our government can do more and should do more, and we will push them for that. To come on to the COSLA point, I'm a proud member of the SNP, but I'm also a proud member of COSLA, and I think that our government, the SNP government, should listen to what COSLA's got to say, because it's important, because I have got the utmost respect for Councillor Alison Everson. I think she's a fantastic president of COSLA. I think she's astute. I think she's used to working. I don't think she's tribal, and I'm glad she actually represents us. I'm also glad Renfrewshire Council's back in COSLA and isn't a member of some kind of wee Labour Council club that it was under the last administration where they got no with the government. So COSLA, proud to be back in it. Yes, the government should listen, but thank God we're back in COSLA to have our voice added to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to allow Jacqueline Cameron in before I get to the summing up, because I know you had your hand up, Jacqueline, and I just forgot to put your name down.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be brief because Councillor Patterson's covered a lot of the points that I was going to make, but yeah, it's the disassociation of the Conservative councillors. When you put your name to that Scottish Conservatives and Unionist Party, you are putting your name to austerity, and austerity has been responsible, and this is not my words, this is the words of independent studies of the United Nations, for 120,000 deaths in this country. That's not the Scottish Government, that's the UK Government. So when you put your name in that, whether you're a councillor, whether you're in it to help the bowling club or the yachting club or whatever, you are putting your name to that party. I grew up in South Lanarkshire, and like most places it was a Labour area, it was a Labour voting area. I was a Labour voter myself for many, many years, and I'll tell you what makes me queasy. What makes me queasy is seeing the Labour Party voting with those Tory councillors again and again and again in this chamber. My grandpa, Samuel Kerkin, bought the Morning Star every day, every week. I don't know, I didn't buy it. But anyway, he would be spinning in his grave to see you councillors colluding with the Tory councillors, and that is why your party are hemorrhaging members like rats off a sinking ship, and that's why we've all jumped to this side who were former Labour voters.
Okay, Councillor Kenny MacLaren.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'll deal with the Tory amendment. Rubbish, absolute shocking, passing the buck. Let's blame somebody else. There is blood on your hands. You are in the party that is killing people with your benefit cuts. No one else is doing it, just you.
This is a motion about food banks. I'm glad, I feel most of the chamber supports the food banks, and it's good that people can help them whenever they can. But part of that help isn't just donating food or volunteering. Part of it's shouting for them. Part of it's standing up for them. When the Trussell Trust produced these figures that are in this motion, to say that the biggest problem that drives people to food banks are the Tory austerity cuts. Austerity cuts that have killed 120,000 people so far. Blood on your hands. So, you say you're going to give them, what was it, 1.7% rise? Well, the House of Lords, what are they getting? 3.1%. So useless old loafers in the House of Lords deserve more? That's them just getting in touch with me. The simple fact is, if you want to do something about the food banks, we can all volunteer, we can all donate, you can blame whoever you want, but the simple fact is, the reason those people are going to food banks is their benefits are cut, their benefits have been slashed. I think it was a report from Citizens Advice Scotland just recently highlighted that benefits, if you get them, are worth 88% of what they were previously before universal credit came in. There's been cuts in benefits all the time. You sit by and say, HS2, there's a lovely big train set to play with. We'll never reach Scotland, but hey, Scotland will pay, was it 4.7 billion towards it? And people are starving. You should hang your head in shame.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we'll go to the vote. Oh, my apologies, no. What does he want to clarify?
I just wanted to check on the amended amendment. Is it just that one sentence that's removed, or is also the initial bit removed, final sentence, and replaced with?
Right.
Is that also removed, or is that still in?
The amendment that we've been given is to remove the final sentence, which, in the motion, which starts with council and ends with family, and they want to replace it with the sentence furthermore and ends in benefits. So they've taken out that initial sentence.
Right, but the removed final sentence is still there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay? Sorry, Bill.
Well, thanks, Provost. Well, I mean, I'm actually probably quite shocked with the sort of way Labour's handled this, to be quite frank. We've basically got a few comments. The English government, we're just trying to attack the English government, and that's going to create a divide, it's going to give us our independence. Well, people are starving. You know, at what point did Labour give up the starving people to try and make sure you can stay part of this union? That's exactly why they were absolutely annihilated in the last Westminster election. You had no leadership, you were not standing up, you were no opposition in that Parliament down in Westminster. There's not much opposition in here, to be quite frank. I'd rather we had more opposition here. But this is why your party is falling flat on its face. You know, you've came second, came third to the Tories in Scotland. What does that say? And the fact that you can't support a motion because we're calling on the Westminster government, the Tory Westminster government, to back down on austerity, it might create that little bit of divide. We know where the loyalties lie. It's with them, and you're putting blood in your hands with them by trying to protect this union, a Great Britain. I don't even know why we use the word Great Britain in front of it. There's no empire anymore. It's long gone. It's not there. I don't know why we get so hung up in this word. We also spoke about the benefits. What can the Scottish Parliament do? Let's bear in mind there are Barnett consequentials. We've got a millionaire sitting in the Tory benches, there's a surprise. But, or maybe two, actually, we'll check the facts on that one. But obviously they don't worry about having to go to a food bank. It's okay for them to come in and move a motion to turn in and say, oh, the job seeker allowance is absolutely fine, universal credit's fine, but I've got a couple of million stuck away. Oh yeah, fantastic. Go and try and tell that to the people that are on the street having to use these facilities. And do you know what? I'll challenge you. Why don't we, together, for 1 month, we will go together and we will try and live off a universal credit. I know I can manage. I wonder if a millionaire could do it. It's just absolutely incredible what I've got in front of me. The other thing was, let's use the Scottish Government. It is Barnett consequentials that we get So if we want to put money into something else, we need to take it from somewhere, give somebody else. The opposition's going to say, oh, you've made a cut here, that's terrible, that's a disgrace, but wait a minute, we'll put it into this, that's a good idea. The thing is we've got motions coming up later on that we'll deal with once we get to them. But yeah, we want to find more money for this, we want to find more money for that. The ultimate source of the money comes from Westminster, through Barnett consequentials. And let's be perfectly clear, as we saw with the education that was going through the Westminster Parliament, we have no say in how much money comes. Scotland has no say in the money it gets through the Barnett consequentials anymore. England decides what they get, and we get the Barnett consequentials of that. So let's be clear, we have no say over that. Then we talk about pressure on spending. We were in a recession. What did we do? Did we try and protect the most vulnerable people in society? Did we put them first? No, we found some money to go and send troops over to foreign countries. We managed to bomb the countries in other places. We found the money to do that. We found the money to have weapons of mass destruction, to kill even more folk, and that's okay. Provost, I think that says enough about them. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we will go to the vote this time.
Thank you, Provost. Roll call vote. The motion is moved by Councillor Mylet, seconded by Councillor Kenny MacLaren. The amendment is moved by Councillor McIntyre, seconded by Councillor Graham. Members, please indicate if you're voting for Councillor Mylet's motion or Councillor McIntyre's amendment. Councillor Adam McGregor. Councillor Begg. No. Councillor Bibby. Councillor Binks. Councillor Brown. Amendment. Councillor Jacqueline Cameron. Motion. Provost Cameron. Motion. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Davidson. Councillor Devine. Amendment. Councillor Andy Doig. Motion. Councillor Audrey Doig. Motion. Councillor Dawn. Councillor Dowling. Amendment. Councillor Grady. Amendment. Councillor Graham. Amendment. Councillor Hart. Amendment. Councillor Hood. Amendment. Councillor Hughes. Amendment. Councillor Kennedy. Amendment. Councillor Kerr. Amendment. Councillor Mack. Motion. Councillor Mackay. Amendment. Councillor James MacLaren. Amendment. Councillor Kenny MacLaren. Motion. Councillor Max MacLaren. Motion. Councillor McCartan.
Motion. I've read what I'm voting for, particularly the Labour Party husband.
Councillor McCulloch. Councillor McEwen. Sorry, Councillor McEwen. Councillor McGurk. Councillor McIntyre. Councillor McNaughton. Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Mylet. Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Patterson. Councillor Rodden. Councillor Sharkey. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Sheridan. Councillor Steele. And Councillor Strang. We have 21 for the motion, 20 for the amendment, and 1 abstention. The motion's carried.